We are approaching one of the biggest decisions this country will face in our lifetimes. The question is, will we be safer, stronger and better off working together in a reformed Europe or out on our own? You will decide through an in-out referendum on Thursday, the 23rd of June. The choice is in your hands.
And now to the cliffhanger vote at this hour in the UK, the so-called Brexit vote. Final decision will almost certainly have an impact on Wall Street here in this country and on the global markets.
Within minutes, the first results and a sign of things to come.
The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
The sun has risen on an independent United Kingdom.
Then another surprise, the Prime Minister of Britain announcing his resignation.
Parliament rejected a deal to leave the European Union for a third time.
No deal must be taken off the table. A permanent customs union must be secured, and people's rights and protections must be guaranteed.
So I am today announcing that I will resign as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party on Friday the 7th of June.
If you genuinely want more time, you can have it. Here it is. But the condition for that is that we all agree to go for a general election on December the 12th. October the 31st is still possible. We could leave on October the 31st.
So he's wrong.
Unfortunately, it depends on what the EU says.
On June 23rd, 2016, the people of Britain made a choice to determine the course of their country's future. The choice seems simple: whether the United Kingdom was to leave or remain in the European Union. By a small margin, the British people chose to leave, beginning a long and arduous transition process. 3 years and 3 prime ministers later, the Brexit deadline draws close and no deal has been made. October 31st, 2019. That is the day. And as we sit here in America, an ocean removed from all of this, we need to realize that in our global society, the effects of Brexit will ripple far beyond the shores of Britain. So it is best to be informed, and that's where I come in. Welcome to... The ideas behind the European Union are nothing new. The movement to unite Europe in some form or another has existed since the end of the Second World War. Winston Churchill advocated for the formation of a sort of United States of Europe in a speech given at the University of Zurich in 1946. In 1973, the UK joined the European Communities, a predecessor to the modern European Union. And ever since the beginning of this arrangement, there have been voices in Britain from both the left and the right advocating for Britain to leave the communities and go at it alone. This movement against the United Europe is called Euroscepticism. The modern European Union was formed in 1993, the UK being a founding member. Member states of the European Union engage in free trade, have open borders, and most share a common currency. In the early 2000s, the EU dramatically expanded its influence over the continent, taking in numerous Eastern European and former Soviet republics. But recently, there has been a rise in Euroscepticism all across Europe, not just the UK. During the 2014 EU parliamentary elections, candidates from nationalist parties such as the UK Independence Party and the French National Front won large amounts of seats in the European Parliament. While centrist pro-EU parties still held majorities, the gains made by Eurosceptic parties were significant and could not be ignored. A major issue Eurosceptics rallied behind was the massive influx of refugees coming from Africa and the Middle East. Leaders like Nigel Farage and France's Marine Le Pen linking the large numbers of migrants coming in to deadly terrorist attacks that had taken place in Britain, France, and Belgium. Sound familiar, Americans? In 2015 and 2016, the movement for Britain to leave the European Union gained considerable momentum, especially within the Conservative Party. It got to the point that in 2016, Prime Minister David Cameron called a referendum on the matter of Brexit. Cameron wanted to reform and restructure the European Union, not leave it entirely. Among those who led the Brexit movement were Farage and London Mayor Boris Johnson, who infamously put an ad on a bus claiming that the UK sends the EU £350 million every week, and that money would be better going elsewhere like the National Health Service. That claim is very misleading, and Johnson is standing by it, even saying it's an understatement. Johnson is just a peculiar fellow, that's for sure. And I don't know about you, he reminds me of somebody. On June 23, 2016, the Brexit referendum was held, and by a small margin, the people of the UK voted in favour of leaving. England and Wales voted primarily to leave the EU, and Scotland and Northern Ireland voted primarily to stay. We'll touch on Northern Ireland in a moment. Seeing this as a major defeat, David Cameron resigned as Prime Minister, and Theresa May took his place as leader of the Conservative Party and as Prime Minister. May was tasked with leading Britain through the transition process. Despite having voted in favor of remaining, she was a Eurosceptic. To her, Brexit means Brexit. Those that are for Brexit believe that the EU threatens Britain's national sovereignty. Article 50 of the treaty establishing the EU lays out a process for how member states can leave the Union if they so choose. But on March 29, 2017, May invoked Article 50, beginning a 2-year transition period in which a deal was to be negotiated on how Brexit would be handled. The deadline slated for March 29, 2019. In May's eyes, no deal was better than a bad deal. In 2018, May had negotiated a deal with the European Union, but it was rejected in Parliament 3 times. The March 29th deadline fast approaching, May asked the European Union for an extension of the transition period, first to April 12th and then to October 31st. The most controversial part of May's Brexit deal was how to handle the matter of the Irish border, the backstop. The backstop aims to prevent a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and North Ireland. To understand why the Irish border is such an important issue here, we need to hop into our time machine to 100 years ago with the Irish War of Independence. During said war, the south of Ireland, what is now the Republic of Ireland, gained independence from the British Crown, and Northern Ireland remained in the UK. North Ireland was primarily Protestant, and the Republic of Ireland was primarily Catholic, so tensions began to emerge on religious lines. The Protestants identified mainly as British, and the Catholics identified mainly as Irish. The Irish nationalists sought the unification of Northern Ireland with the Republic. The ensuing conflict between the North and the Republic from the 60s to the 90s was known as the Troubles. The Irish Republican Army carried out violent attacks in support of the nationalist cause. Tensions were not helped at all by British paramilitary forces attacking Catholic civil rights protests in an event known as Bloody Sunday. The Troubles ended with the Good Friday Agreement of 1998 and has brought about 20 years of peace between Ireland and the UK. If a no-deal Brexit were to go through, the UK's open border with Ireland would likely become a hard border. The Ireland-North Ireland border would be UK's only land border with the European Union. May's solution to the Irish border was the backstop. But that solution was incredibly unpopular because it would require Britain to continue maintaining close economic relations with the EU, and some felt like it would put Britain in a place where it doesn't want to be down the road. The backstop is what killed May's deal. Boris Johnson has claimed that the backstop would jeopardize Britain's economic independence. After trying and failing to get her backstop deal through Parliament 3 times, Theresa May resigned as Prime Minister, after which Johnson, one of the strongest champions of Brexit, was elected Prime Minister. Johnson is adamant about getting Brexit through by the October 31st deadline, even if it means no deal. Johnson's biggest adversary here is the opposition party, the Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn. In September, Johnson tried to suspend Parliament for 5 weeks, which would severely cut down on the amount of time Parliament could spend debating a deal before the Halloween deadline. The movement received enormous opposition and was ruled by the British Supreme Court that suspending Parliament in this manner was an abuse of his power as Prime Minister. Johnson has since negotiated another deal with the European Union, but it's very unlikely it'll be passed through Parliament by the deadline. The people of Northern Ireland see Johnson's deal as a betrayal, as it effectively places a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Since then, Johnson has proposed calling a general election on December 12th and extending the Brexit deadline once again to January 31st, 2020. The Labour Party here is caught between a rock and a hard place, and Corbyn says that he will only agree to calling an election if Johnson promises to rule out the possibility of a no-deal Brexit entirely, as the consequences of a no-deal would be enormous, not just for Britain, but for the world. Currently, this is where things stand. No deal has been agreed on, Johnson is pushing for an election, and Brexit is on Thursday. It is frightening how close we are to the edge. The consequences of Brexit will not be limited to just Britain and the EU. The entire world will feel its effects, good or bad, but at this point, only time will tell what happens. Thanks for watching.